Every year we ask the expert academic advisors to make nominations, and we include a variety of considerations, one of them being need, another being an interest in public service. We're interested in moral character, integrity, intellect, leadership potential. So when we have the annual gathering of the fellows and former fellows and the academic advisors, it seemed only appropriate to see if we couldn't find some speakers who we considered to have an interest in public service, integrity, moral character, intellect, and leadership qualifications. It didn't take long for us to stumble across the name of General Pete Pace. He, 40 years in the Marines? Good grief. One day I was in Mongolia and the Marine group came out and they wanted to have a picture taken. They guard the embassy over in Ulaanbaatar, and like a dumbbell, I said to the Marines as they all gathered around me, I said, "You do know that you're part of the Navy Department?" And they said, "Yes, the men's division." You'd think I'd be smart enough to not say something stupid like that. So I'm not going to say anything like that, General Pace. That's true. I hadn't thought of that, but I should have. Yeah, that's not my only weakness. Pete has done it all at every level in the Marine Corps, from, I guess you were a platoon leader to start out, and in Vietnam. Graduated from the Naval Academy, has an advanced degree. I'm always worried that you find a military person with an advanced degree from, you would get, you know, maybe get a weak chin and thin blood, but no, that would never be the case. That wouldn't be the case. Graduate of the National War College. He has awards, so many that if he ever had them all on and fell in the pool, he'd drown. But he also was given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award, which he deserved for sure. I one day told him I thought I was going to nominate him to become the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There'd never been a Marine. First of all, the Marines didn't used to even be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he became the first Marine to be the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then I suggested to him that I thought we'd really reach down in the duffel bag and nominate him for Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And he said, "If you do, you will have demonstrated that you have quite a sense of humor." But he did become the first to do either of those posts. They are the posts that are the senior military advisors to the President of the United States, to the National Security Council, as well as the Secretary of Defense. And he's doing a lot today in various nonprofit activities. He serves, he and his wife Lynn both do serve on a number of military charities and activities, and is a person who, I must say, I have been very fortunate to serve with a lot of fine people, but this gentleman is, he represents public service about as well as anyone you will ever meet. General Pete Pace.
Am I on now? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. It's a delight to be here. This is not going to start out like a big loving between the Secretary and myself, but you need to know this gentleman was a fabulous Secretary of Defense. He was a tough, tough boss.
Sweet and lovable.
No, sweet and lovable, I guess, Joyce. Joyce would have to tell us that. Tough boss. Nobody worked harder, and nobody had your back better than he did. It was an honor, sir, to serve with you, and to meet your lady. Joyce, you are an incredible lady. Thanks for what you've done for the country. It's my pleasure to be with you today. We've got till about 1:30, 13:30 military time. I've been asked to talk to you about kind of a day in the life of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, just so you kind of know how that all unfolds. A little bit about the National Security Council and how it functions and doesn't function. A little bit about national security planning and the process there, and then something about leadership, and to get all that stuffed in with enough time left for some questions from you all. When we get the Q&A, nothing's out of bounds. Anything I did, didn't do, should have done, shouldn't have done. Today's topics, yesterday's topics, whatever you want to know about. If I know the answer, I will tell you. If I don't, I'll make something up. By the time you figure it out, I'll be gone. But I've got some great friends here from when we all served together with the Secretary. It's good to see you all. Unfortunately, they know the truth, so if they start snickering when I'm telling you something, you'll know that they're probably remembering it different than I do. As chairman, my day would start off at about 4:30 in the morning. I'd get up, do a little bit of physical training, get showered up, have breakfast, and then get in the car about 6:15 for the 15-minute drive down to the Pentagon. In the back of the car would be papers with the night's security briefings in them, intel briefings. When I got down to the Pentagon, my CIA briefer would be there, and he or she would have the stuff that they couldn't leave in the car for me. They'd brief me from anywhere from about 15 minutes to a half hour. So by 7 o'clock, normally I was fairly well depressed. At 7 o'clock, we'd have a stand-up meeting. The primary staff for the chairman would come in, and we'd just kind of go a quick lap around the world, because 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there's somebody someplace on the planet doing something stupid. I needed to know what that was, and to know whether or not there was something the military ought to be doing about it. Because if it was a Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, the Secretary and I were going to go to the White House for our National Security Council meetings, and we'd leave about 7:30. NSC meetings lasted about an hour and a half. We normally had on the video teleconference the commanders from the field. Some chairmen believed that they should be the only military advisor. I think there's a distinct distinction between being the principal military advisor and being the only military advisor. I always thought it was extremely important that the chairman and the Secretary not only speak their minds to the President, but our field commanders have the opportunity to do so as well, because the President had a lot on his plate, and he needed to have the understanding of what his commanders were doing. If it was a Wednesday, right after the NSC meeting, the Secretary and I would go to the Oval Office and have what was euphemistically called a one-on-one, but as I remember it, it was the Secretary and the Chairman, and on occasion, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, the CIA Director, the Vice President, the President, and probably somebody else I forgot. But those were opportunities for the President to ask the Secretary and myself questions that he didn't want to ask in front of other people yet, and for us to brief him on things that we wanted to tell him about, not yet in front of other people. Those were amazing meetings. I got very, very comfortable going to the White House. I never got comfortable walking into the Oval Office. It was a special moment every single time I walked in there. And I think that was also honed by the fact that President Bush would not be in that office unless he was in a suit, because he respected that office as well. It was an amazing place to be. One of the things I had to always remind myself was, do not tell the President of the United States something you do not know. Now that sounds simple enough, but when you are the principal military advisor and somebody says to you, Pete, what do you think about X? What do you know about Y? You want to have the answer. When I was vice chairman, it was a week or two into the job, October of 2001, I went to that meeting because Dick Myers, the chairman, was on travel. So the Secretary and I go, and the President asked me about the third question in, I didn't know. And I simply said to the President, Mr. President, I don't have a clue, but I'll find out. And when I did that, you could see the President just relax. And he's told me many times since that he very much appreciated the fact that he knew that when I was speaking to him, I was very careful to make sure he knew what I knew for fact, what I was extrapolating from fact, where I was in that spectrum, of confidence or not. When those meetings were over, we would go back to the Pentagon, and the Secretary made sure that, insisted that the Secretary, the Deputy Secretary, the Chairman, and the Vice Chairman, the four of us, attended every meeting together. It was important to do so. We did not have time to back brief each other. If you missed a meeting, you missed it. We're on to the next event. And now we're out in front of public speaking someplace, or we're out in front of the news media, or wherever we're all going separately. We need to be on the same sheet of music. Because of that, we would go from meeting to meeting to meeting. And it would normally be about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening before I get back to my own office. Work the highly classified stuff in the office, put the rest of the stuff that I could take out of the building into a book bag, go home, have dinner with my wife, work the book bag that night after dinner, go to bed, get up the next morning, do it again. It sounds onerous. It wasn't. It was an honor to do it. And it wasn't until the day I retired that I realized that there was some pressure there. But it was only because when I got up the first day of being retired, it was kind of like you're in a room where a fan is on and all of a sudden somebody turns it off. You don't know it's on until they turn it off. I didn't know I was under any kind of pressure until I wasn't. And then I knew I was really retired about 2 or 3 weeks later when I started reading in the Washington Post things I didn't already know. Because the Washington Post for us was, what's still secret? So much for that part of the process. The National Security Council itself functions extremely well in one direction and not well in another. When the President needs courses of action to solve a problem, the system works really well. Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, all the cabinet level departments get together, and I'll use military terms, get together at the 1-star level, then the 2-star level, then the 3-star level. At the 4-star level, the President is in the room. At the 1, 2, and 3-star level, and the 4-star level, there's great collaboration. Can you do this? How do you do that? Can you do this piece? No, it's not going to work that way. Open dialogue, very open and accommodating with each other, trying to do the right thing for the nation. Good Americans trying to do the right thing. Courses of action developed, presented to the President. Normally, the first time out, the President's got a lot of questions. You go back, you do more push-ups, get the answers, come on back until the President's comfortable he's got the information he needs. Then he makes a decision. The instant the President makes a decision is when the system goes from being very useful to the nation to not being as good as it should be. This is not about Democrats and Republicans. It worked this way under President Clinton. It worked this way under President Bush. It's been working this way under President Obama. It's just the way it is. The reason it is because now the President says, go forth and do this for the nation. And each secretary takes his or her piece of this and goes back. DOJ takes this place. State takes theirs. Treasury takes theirs. And because each of them has a different responsibility, they start executing their piece. There's nobody at the top other than the President to ride herd over that process. And because the President's busy, if nobody's directing traffic below him, then you have agencies that are trying to do the right thing for their responsibilities, creating friction with each other, which plays out downrange, like in Iraq, for example, in things that go wrong, not because people aren't trying, but because of the way that things are not coordinated. I'll save you my 45-minute presentation on how to fix that, but if you want to know, break out the 1986 Goldwater-Nichols Act, which told your military to share their toys and get to love each other. It took 20 years to make that happen, by the way. From 1986 was the bill, Goldwater-Nichols. Read that, and you can apply the Goldwater-Nichols bill to the interagency process. And if you did so, you would solve a lot of problems. We can go more into that if you like, but I think given time constraints, I'll stop there on that. Next, there is a national security strategy, part of which is your national military strategy, all of which eventually devolves down to budgets. What has been going on for the last about 8 years plus, and I don't mean this to sound political, but you need to know the problem so we can come up with a solution. The problem has been that The DOD has been told, here is a bucket of money, go spend it the best way you know how. That's a way to do it, but it doesn't solve the nation's problems the way it should. What should happen, and what I'm proud to say did happen when we had responsibility, is there's a dialogue with the president about what the threats are around the world. And over time, the president gets the comfort level to understand how much is out there, what needs to be done. And then the president says, this is what I want our military to do. This is what you need as a starting basis. Mr. President, Madam President, what do you want your armed forces to do? Now, we've got to get you educated about the threats so you understand. But eventually you get to that point. Let's say the president says, I want to be able to conduct the current war on terrorism and defeat aggression anywhere on the planet within 60 days. Call it Korea. Okay, thank you, sir. We go back to the Pentagon, and there are people in the Pentagon who can take that guidance using the war plans that we have for the planet and come back to the secretary and say, okay, sir, the president said this. We're going to need X planes, Y ships, Z troops to do that. The math on that says, I'll make up a number, $800 billion. You go to the president, once the secretary agrees, and you present it to the president. And you say, Mr. President, you told us to do this. This is what we just determined it's going to cost. And he goes, I can't, you know, he's not going to gasp in front of me, but you know, he's going to choke on that a little bit and say, you know, I don't have $800 billion to give you. Good, I got it. This is where the process really takes root. Now, okay, Mr. President, if we can't have $800 billion, you told us to defeat aggression anywhere on the planet in 60 days. Are you okay with 6 months? Because if you're okay with 6 months, if you take that extra risk for the nation, if you give us 6 months, we have to have fewer troops on alert, fewer troops forward deployed, fewer this, fewer that. And that's the dialogue you should get into, which is, what do you want us to do? This is what it's going to cost. How much risk are you willing to take so that we can get the cost down to where we're doing what you want us to do, you're comfortable with how long it's going to take to do it, you're comfortable with the risks involved, and we come in at a budget number that you can live with and take to the Congress. As opposed to, here's $500 billion, go buy me the best military you can. And oh, by the way, when the Secretary and I had it, it was $700 billion. A couple years later, it was $500 billion. And don't get me wrong, a kid from New York knows that $500 billion is a boatload of money. But $500 billion is not $700 billion. And when you get $500 billion and you're told to keep doing everything you were doing at $700 billion, that dog doesn't hunt. And that's why you've got planes and ships and troops parked right now, because we don't have enough money. I'm not saying how much money we should have. I'm just saying we need to stick to a better process to determine that. And if you all go out and start working in the government, those are the kinds of things that you need to get fundamentally right. Okay. I've been asked to talk to you about leadership. And I look around this room and I know that the reason you're in this room is because you've already proven yourself to be a leader. So I'm probably going to be refreshing your memory on some things rather than telling you things you don't already know. But it's fun to share ideas. And for me, what I'm going to tell you are things that for me were important for various reasons over my 40-plus years in the Marine Corps. And I'll share them with you, and if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. You know, leadership principles are universal, but leadership application is very much individual. So I like it when somebody comes up to me and puts their arm around me and tells me I did a good job. I like to go around, you know, I shook all your hands as many as I could, because it's important for me to have personal touch. For me, putting my arm around somebody and giving a hug works. But you know, if you see something you admire in somebody else, try it. See if it works for you. But you know, if anybody's ever tried to hug you who's not comfortable doing it, it's like two magnets repelling. You do more damage than good. So all I'm saying to you is, by all means, emulate those leaders who you admire. But if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. Just leave it out of your kit bag and stick with the things that do feel comfortable. Because being natural is most important. So the first thing I would talk to you about is, going to sound funny from a guy who spent 40 years in the Marine Corps, pick where you're going to work. Now, we're all at the same time, subordinates and bosses. So, if you're the subordinate, why would you ever go anyplace without Googling that organization? Seeing who they are, what they do, what the leadership is like. And after that, if you like what you see, by all means go and try to get that job. But for goodness sakes, if you don't like what they're doing, why would you ever join? You know, if you're the CEO and you parachute in, you might be able to change the culture of the organization. But if you're not that person, especially at our level, we're coming in, the longer we stay in the organization, the more we are going to look like that organization. So Google it. Look at where you're going. Do you want to be that way 10 years from now? Do you want to be that person 10 years from now? If the answer is yes, go for it. If it's not, run away. Go someplace else. The next thing then, which sounds counter to the first one, but it's not, is grow where you are planted. Oh, by the way, on the first part, if you are the boss, Google yourself if you haven't recently. Google your organization, your company, if you haven't recently, and ask yourself, would you join you? And if the answer is yes, hang in there. If it's no, do something. Now, grow where you're planted. Every single one of us knows exactly what they'd like to be doing in their lives, right? You know you want to be this person. It doesn't happen that way most of the time. You join the organization that you want to be in if you're lucky, and then the organization needs you to do something else. My life has told me many, many times that the organization knows better than I do where I best fit. If I did every single thing I wanted to do in the Marine Corps when I had the chance to do it, I'd be a retired colonel now. Don't get me wrong. You make colonel, you part the course. But other people sent me other places to do things I didn't want to do that gave me the experiences that the organization needed me to have to allow me to compete, to be promoted. If you're the boss, it's important to make sure that your subordinates know that you know what they like to do. If I'm the subordinate, I want you to know what, A, I'd like to do this, but B, I'm going to do whatever you need me to do. And oh, by the way, if I earn the opportunity, then if the job comes open down the road, please consider me for it. But in the meantime, I'm going to do the job you lay out for me. If you're the boss, it's important for you to tell me, hey, Pete, I know you want to do A. I need you to do B. If I can, I'll get you A, but I need you to do B. If I've got that as a subordinate, I'm good to go. But growing where you're planted, to me, is hugely important because there are more good jobs out there than there are good people. And companies, and whether it's military or civilian or whatever, need, want, cultivate team players. And that's where you become a team player. Next, make decisions. When I was lieutenant, I learned this early on as a lieutenant. I went to Vietnam. I was in Tet Offensive of '68 in Hue City. We got a hell of a battle going on. We finally win that thing, and now my platoon of some 40 guys is going to lead my company of some 160 Marines on a patrol outside the city of Hue to see whether or not there's any NVA left. We're out there. It's single file because of the terrain we were in, and I've got the lead. They call being on the point. I've got the point, and I come to a decision point. I call back to my company commander, who's a captain. I'm a 22-year-old lieutenant. He's a 25, 26-year-old captain. I'm calling him and saying, basically, do you want me to go left or go right? And he says, go left. About a half hour later, I call him for some more guidance, and he gives it to me. The third time I called him for guidance on this patrol, if you take out the curse words, he did not say anything. But I got the message, which was, hey, Lieutenant, that's why you're out there. Make decisions. I promised myself from that day on, that was 1968, I promised myself if I ever got my butt chewed again, which I did, it was going to be for going too far. Somebody's going to have to hold me back. Make decisions. If you're the boss, have you told your subordinates where their left and right limits are, so to speak? What's the area in which you expect them to make decisions? But if you're the subordinate, start making decisions. especially in healthy organizations, if you're making decisions and you're trying and you're working real hard, the boss will absorb a certain amount of mistakes. If you're working for me, I just don't want you to make the same mistake twice. But if you're not making any mistakes, now I'm worried about you even, are you doing what you should be doing? Are you out there trying? If you know it's your decision to make it. If you know it's your boss's decision to make, get it to him or her as fast as you can, because you're stealing leadership time from them. If you're not sure, here's what I recommend you do. Think about what you'd do if it was your decision. Once you decide what's the right thing to do, go to your boss and say, hey, boss, I'm not sure if this is your decision or mine. If it's mine, this is what I'm going to do. If it's yours, that's what I recommend you do. If you're working for me, I love you. You haven't just come to me like a bird waiting for me to put a worm in your mouth. You've said, here's the problem. Here's a potential solution to it. I can then either say, hey, you got it, go do it, or, okay, it's mine, I'll do it the way you recommend, or I'm going to extrapolate off what you said. But either way, I love the fact that you're my subordinate, because you're thinking, you're acting, you're taking action. Make decisions. Next, I call it setting your moral compass. I got to go back to Vietnam again, because that's where I learned that I almost didn't have one. I had been through the basic school down here at Quantico, Virginia, where all Marine lieutenants go to school. We all knew we were going to go to Vietnam. We had these leadership discussions about atrocities in combat, and I remember thinking to myself and saying out loud, there's no way I would ever let myself or anybody in my command do anything illegal or immoral in combat. Not going to happen. Off to Vietnam. 30 July 1968, we're patrolling outside of Da Nang, and a sniper shoots and kills my machine gun squad leader. Lance Corporal Guido Farinello, Bethpage, New York. Great young man, came to the United States from Italy. Went to school at Chaminade High School in Long Island. Most of his classmates went on to college. He elected to serve his adopted country first. He's shot and killed 30 July. And I'm with Guido when he dies, and I am infuriated. I called in an artillery strike on the village from which the fire came. And it takes time for the guns to figure out where you are, where the enemy is, how to put the right information into the system to put the rounds on the right target. Thank God. Because during the time that was going on, my platoon sergeant, my number one enlisted man, I'm 22, he's like 20, but he's on his second tour, I'm on my first, doesn't say anything to me. But he's looking at me, and I know by the way he's looking at me that I'm doing this wrong. So I call off the artillery strike, and we did what we should have done, which is sweep through the village on foot. And go figure, we found nothing but women and children. I don't know how I could live with myself today had I killed all those innocents. It stunned me. When we got done with that patrol, I got my platoon together and I apologized to them. And I told them to the best of my ability I would never let that happen again. But what I learned was that, and it's repeated itself multiple times in my life, you will be challenged morally when you are least prepared emotionally to deal with it. And therefore, setting your moral compass when you're in a nice room like this, when nobody's shooting at you, or somebody's not asking you to do something you shouldn't be doing, knowing who you are is fundamental to being happy with yourself. I have literally every day, since that day in 1968, every single morning when I'm shaving, I kind of think through the day, what kinds of challenges might come that day, what I might be asked to do, what moral challenge might come my way. 99.9% of the time, if not more, nothing I thought of ever happened. That's not the point. The point is, just like you're in school, you're not going to remember pick a course 101 and what you learned from Professor so-and-so that day. What you're getting from your education is how to solve problems, how to think. That's the value of education. The value of setting your moral compass repeatedly isn't that you're going to know exactly what challenge is going to come, but that it trains you train yourself as part of your thought process. When your boss says, go forth and do this, part of your thought process is, should I do that? Your boss needs that as much as you do. Because, especially now, it's not combat all the time, thank God. You're in the business world. All of a sudden, the competitor does something that completely surprises you, or a deadline changes, or something has to happen, and people are in the sweat grenade mode where they're running around trying to get stuff done, and your boss is starting to not even consciously cut corners to get the job done. And that's when you really have to be attentive. If you're the subordinate, you've got to have the personal moral compass and the courage to speak up. And if you're the boss, you need to have said to your subordinates, I want to execute my responsibilities in a highly moral way. And if any of you ever see me straying, please call me on it. And when they do, if it ever happens that way, you got to thank them publicly. But it's very much a two-way street. Having your own compass and making sure your subordinates understand what you want and talking to your boss. It won't surprise you that I admire courage. And I've seen, as have others in this room, incredible acts of courage on the battlefield. But that's not the courage I'm talking about. I'm talking about the courage of an individual in a well-lit room, air-conditioned room, who's listening to the conversation, and it's peers and bosses, and he's sitting there, he or she's sitting there, and they have the temerity to say, I see it differently, and here's why. That person is worth their weight in gold. The person who will critically listen and ask questions. As a general officer, if I want to know how brilliant I am, I will convince myself of that in the mirror when I'm shaving. I need my subordinates to tell me my baby is ugly if my baby is ugly. Okay? Now, when you're the subordinate, you know, if I say, Jeremiah, you're my boss. If I say, Jeremiah, I disagree with what you just said. Now I set up a testosterone problem here. Jeremiah has to win 9 times out of 8 because he's the boss. But if I said to you instead, getting the point on the table, Jeremiah, if you hadn't said that, I was thinking this. Can you educate me? I've asked a question. I've got my idea on the table. If I'm right, you can say, hey, Pete, you're right. If I'm wrong, you're going to give me the education I asked for. Either way, the organization wins. Now, quite honestly, as I got more senior, when I used that technique, I always thought to myself, well, of course I'm right. I got the education I asked for just enough times to remind myself I'm not quite as smart as I think I am sometimes. Okay? Ask the question. I'm not trying to stand up in front of a beer truck to get run over. But I am saying to you, you need to get your thoughts on the table. You should never, ever leave a conversation with a feeling in your stomach that something's not right here. And if you're the boss, you have the responsibility to set that tone. I'll go back to President Bush. It was, whatever it was, week 1 or 2 when I went over to be the acting chairman for the NSC meeting. And the very first meeting I'm at, I'm listening to a conversation that has nothing to do with the military, and it didn't seem right. And I simply said to the president, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, but, and that's as far as I got. And he said, Pete, as long as you're in this room, nothing is out of your lane. Aye, sir. 2 days later, the next NSC meeting, I'm still acting chairman. We go back in. I'm still trying to be, one of the guys. I'm new. I don't want to pretend like I know everything. Another thing's on the table that has nothing to do with the military. I, trying to be gentle about it, again say, Mr. President, this is a little bit out of my lane, but, and he says, again, stopping me right there, Pete, didn't I tell you 2 days ago that as long as you're in this room, nothing is out of your lane? And I said, Mr. President, you did, and you'll never have to tell me that again. What the president did was he told everybody in that room, these are very powerful people, they're the secretaries of whatever, very powerful people. What he told them was, just because the, quote, expert in the room on that topic is talking, he expected their brains to be engaged in asking questions. And he told me, without telling me, that just because I was wearing a uniform, he fully expected everybody in suits and dresses to be asking me questions until they were comfortable. The senior person sets the tone and facilitates courage from below. But you've got to have the courage to speak up. And you've got to come up with your own technique. For me, it's been, I still do it in boardrooms. I still ask questions instead of make statements. Because people don't have to defend their side of the table if you do that. Two last points and we'll get to your questions. One, somebody once said to me, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. And if you do not have integrity, nothing else matters. And that pretty much sums that up. Last, take care of the people in your charge. It's the sacred obligation of being a leader. How do you do that? Well, for one thing, when you take over, you stand in front of your folks and you tell them who you are, and you can say to them, I plan on showing it to you by demonstrating it to you through my actions that I truly care about you all as individuals. But at that point, most folks are from Missouri. That's a show me now, right? Over time, what I recommend you do is very simple. Take 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes, and talk to one of your subordinates about anything other than work. Who are they? What are their aspirations in life? What's going on in their lives? Just talk to them like the human beings they are. Sometimes they'll tell you about problems. Most of the time, you can only commiserate because you can't do anything about the problem. Sometimes you can. When you can, that makes you feel even better. Then, stand up for them when you should be standing up for them. You don't need to go back to your cubicle and say, well, oh, I just did this. Hell, they'll know before you get back. The office grapevine is incredible. Standing up for your people, fighting for their salaries, fighting for their being protected from whatever's coming down from above. Just doing the kinds of things that you would want somebody to do for you. We all want to have a boss that we admire. Your subordinates want a boss that they admire. If you are a caring leader, an amazing thing happens. Folks in your charge will take personal and professional risk to get to your goal. You stand in front of them and you say, the objective is to get this done, and this is how I want it done, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Without fail, as soon as they start to execute that, things that you're not smart enough, nor I'm smart enough to realize start happening. There's friction. In a caring organization, the subordinates will not come running back to the boss for an answer. They'll decide on their own how to change the orders you gave them to get to the goal you gave them. Most of the time, they're going to get it right. Sometimes they won't. If you praise them in both cases, you're going to be fine. If they think that Pete Pace is all about going from captain to major and major to lieutenant colonel, guess what they're going to do? Exactly what I told them to do. Exactly the way I told them to do it. And because none of us is smart enough, that's going to grind to a halt and fail. And they're going to giggle behind my back when I got carted off and they bring in a new boss. Now, the reason to take care of your folks is because that's what good leaders do. But the result of it is you have an organization that performs at a level beyond which none of us has any right to think we could actually lead other human beings to do. It's amazing. And when you have that, all of the hard work of being a leader, so to speak, pales in comparison to the excitement of being a leader. Let me stop